an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece episodes 498 through 500. Luffy becoming an apprentice, a man who fought against the king of the pirates, the battle against the big tiger who is going to be captain, and freedom taken away, the nobles' plot closing in on the brothers. In these episodes, there is a lot going on here, but the main thing that I think is going to be preoccupying all of us is the threat of the fire that is scheduled to completely eradicate everybody. And, I mean, is this that far from the truth? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. Y'all, this got me thinking. You know, like, there are some story beats that I think a decade ago would have felt more outlandish to me than they do now. Even though the story beats are cartoonish, I have grown to realize that we do actually live in a world of cartoonish evil in a lot of ways. It's different than what I thought cartoonish evil was. I used to think that being cartoonishly evil was like one of those silent film villains twirling his mustache as he ties a girl to the train tracks. And that still is a version of cartoonishly evil. But in this case, what I mean is, these people are, we find out, aware this fire is scheduled to happen. And I think the fact that they all react as like, no, it's a good thing. Yes, it's over the top. It is cartoonish. And I'm not saying that's exactly how it would be in real life. But I am saying that it may as well be like that in real life for how much we give a shit and do the right thing instead. That's really where I'm coming from. So I will back up and I will talk about things from the first of these 3 episodes, but you know I have to just talk about this, like, the issue here is the fact that we have a problem with, as a society, of trying to make it like our main problem is that law enforcement can't stop all the crimes that it should. That if only people weren't so bad, so irreversibly bad, we wouldn't have to treat them the way that we do. But that's human nature. And there's something very grim about that outlook anyway, but it leads to this very interesting sort of personality divide that I think is sort of fundamental to where you fall on the political spectrum. And if you are somebody who believes that people are mostly the worst and mostly lying liars who will con you if they can to get a free ride, you're more likely to be conservative with that mindset versus somebody who believes the best. Like, do I think that we are 90% good? No. I believe we are about 60% good, 55%. But I think that's enough to justify being optimistic and hopeful and to want everybody to have what they need to survive without feeling like there need to be qualifications for that. And what happens with these people who believe the worst of humanity is, if you do wind up getting more of the pie, if you wind up in a position of privilege, what you do to justify the fact that you now have this privilege is you convince yourself you deserve it and the people who don't have it do not deserve it. You have to do that second one, because it's one thing to think that you deserve it, but then comes the natural second thought, for me anyway. Well, do you think they don't? But the thing is, a lot of people don't realize they're setting up this dichotomy in their brain to make themselves feel better, and that it's not necessarily grounded in anything, because they don't want to admit that they have this privilege to begin with. Folks just ignoring privilege and acting like it's not a real thing are a dime a dozen. So what you have to do is you have to buy into the mentality of more people being worse than good people, like a higher percentage of people being terrible than the percentage of people who are decent folks just trying to get by. And you have to create this story in your head about how they deserve to be where they are, on the streets, living paycheck to paycheck, whatever, that it's their own fault. And this way you can sleep at night. You can tell yourself that you aren't stealing anything from anybody by having this privilege, that it's not a result of putting other people down and actively enforcing their oppression and putting them into positions where they feel the desperate need to do whatever they can, which creates crime. You can't tell yourself that, like, you are indirectly responsible for the crime as much as the criminals in a lot of ways. So you have to tell yourself those people are all bad. All of them are threats, and we would be better off without them. And this is where you get gated communities. And, you know, the more I think about it and the way that things are working with the celestial dragons wearing these helmets so that they're not even breathing the same air as everybody else, it's like a teeny tiny gated community they're living inside with their suit, you know, which I know that I've had these theories about whether they take their helmets off and there's like suddenly they shrivel up and die out of contact with the regular air. But seeing it as teeny tiny little gated communities that they're just walking around inside is very, very funny. So I think I'm just going to keep with that. And I want to point when people like to illustrate my point about how this thing with the fire is like, feels like not that big an exaggeration. There are two things that I want to point to. The first one is the history in the United States of either the government or independent parties that group together in a mob deciding to burn down entire black neighborhoods. And this is like shockingly common and something that we really don't like to talk about in this country. But there are whole financial districts that were like the idea that black people have been oppressed up until slavery, they got free, and then they have just been struggling this whole time because they are so far behind. It's understandable why we think that, but it actually isn't that much of a straight line. They were freed. They were given, for the first time, access to some opportunities, and they hustled so fucking hard that they actually began to succeed a lot earlier than you would think. And we had like black men being elected to high positions in the government because they hadn't yet figured out gerrymandering and voter suppression. And so early on, black folks were becoming successful, and white folks really had a problem with that. And so they literally physically destroyed these districts, the records, the goods, the homes, the money, and reset them back to zero, basically. And we have done that so many times all over the country. I believe even Central Park is an example. So this idea of like basically firebombing the place isn't actually that far off at all in terms of undesirable elements that we want out of here. The motivation may be slightly different, but it's fundamentally the same. And then, if we're going to bring it up to the present day, let's talk about homelessness and the ways in which we hide the homeless if we are going to be, as a city, hosting a big event. And this was a really big deal last year when Biden was going to go visit San Francisco, I think it was. San Francisco, with their skyrocketing cost of living and housing crisis, has like some of the highest percentage of unhoused people in the United States as a city. Homelessness is skyrocketing everywhere because of this housing crisis, but San Francisco already had such a premium housing market, and then with the fact that the Silicon Valley boom happened there, it was just a perfect storm to make everything almost unlivable in a short time. So President Biden was going to go visit for his campaign trail thing, and they tried to pass an ordinance basically saying that they could level tent cities that were set up by the homeless because there are so many, they don't know what to do. They don't have the housing to put up all of these people. And finally, a judge had to come in and be like, no, you can't just do that. You can make them move to clean the street and keep things accessible for people. But you can't just fucking force them out or destroy things. And even with this being said by this judge, there are so many stories from homeless people talking about cops coming in and literally pissing all over their stuff. They have 6 items to their name, and the cops think it's funny to just destroy what they have. There's a video that went around several years ago of a cop literally shitting into 2 pieces of bread and giving it to a homeless man as a sandwich as a joke. This is how they are treated. And Biden's coming, and we can't let him see this. So what do? Do they use a tiny fraction of the budget they're using to make the town look prettier to buy some cheap hotel rooms and put these people in them? Of course not. They just bar them. They just keep them from getting into certain areas. So these folks are left in the outskirts of this main area, sleeping literally under bridges and overpasses and stuff. And it was November, guys. We're getting into the cold part of the month. And this was what they were forcing these people to do. And the disgusting quality of this, I'm not going to try and solve the problem. I just don't want our president to see the problem. Can we just stop and think about that for a second? It's you're going to see a doctor because the president is supposed to be somebody that knows about these problems and is prepared to deal with them, right? So it's you're going to see a doctor and you have this huge lesion on your face and you just decide you're going to put makeup over it and not mention it. This man's whole job is supposedly serving us, and we are meant to hold him accountable for a lot of things. If these people have no place to live, it is his failing and yours in, much more directly, but still, let him see what is real. What are you doing? But it's just sheer pride, the sheer inconvenience of the privileged people who have money and jobs stepping over somebody when they're on a subway platform, and they shouldn't have to do that. So that person needs to get out of the way. And I'm not trying to pretend that unhoused people just don't pose a threat, because they certainly can, but not the way we pretend. And the out of sight, out of mind approach is a slightly more sanitized version than we're just going to burn it all down. But honestly, in some ways it amounts to the same thing. And I know that may sound extreme, but I'm just saying it. I'm just going to say it. What this all comes down to for me, guys, as usual, what makes me so angry is that it doesn't have to be this way. Like, we have options. We have resources. This doesn't have to be how it works. And we keep choosing the same system over and over again, year after year. And I don't understand us. I just don't. So let's back it up now. Let's talk about Luffy becoming an apprentice, because we meet a new character and he is actually quite fun. So we start off with the boys. They're trying to hunt, and Luffy is like coming at this bear from above on a cliff top, while Sabo and Ace are on the ground, and it's winter. So this is something that like kind of comes into play a little bit later, is the fact that it starts to get warmer out and things begin to change. But Luffy is going for this bear, and he actually manages to take it down with his final like hit. I've got to be honest, you guys. I had a hard time with how much of these episodes dealt with killing animals. And I know that this is like a actual like survival need, and I don't blame them that. And I appreciate in some ways that the animator is making them look a lot more like real wild animals that are dangerous and intimidating, and not as much like cute cartoon animals that I don't want anybody to hurt. But it still was really hard to watch like a bunch of boys trying to gang up on a bear in the woods. Like, I was just sort of like, the bear. And later on with the tiger as well. And they're making this plan of like, whoever gets to kill the tiger. And I was just like, the tiger, leave him alone. What's he done? He stole their dinner though. So I guess. But yeah, that's what happens is this tiger comes up and steals the bear from Luffy, who tries to fight back and is just so angry because it's his first kill. So he's taking it extremely personally that this tiger just strolls up and takes it. But that's like part of the deal. The law of the jungle, as they say, like somebody can come and just take your shit. And that's how that works. So they have to like, Sabo and Ace have to gather Luffy up and carry him away because he is just prepared to keep fighting. And I just couldn't help but laugh at the fact that Ace is yelling at Luffy when he does this exact same thing. Like, I understand that Luffy isn't at the level that Ace is in terms of fighting, but it is really funny to see how indignant Ace is about this. And then think back to the way he has reacted every time he has ever been challenged, and that he just would never back down. He doesn't do that. And we have this like incident on the bridge. This was so weird, and I feel like this has to come up later because the way this shook out felt strange. But they're crossing this rope bridge over a river, and Luffy is just still hung up on the tiger taking his catch. And he says he can't steal from me. I'm going to teach him a lesson. And he jumps up and down on the bridge, which causes it to sway really bad. And as it sways, he gets this look on his face. And he's just like, oh, I'm going to do it again. Which was very correct in terms of what little children are like. They see something happen, and like the fact that it's not likely to continue that way forever, that it's probably eventually going to end in one of us plummeting to our death, that part doesn't occur to them. All they notice is that the bridge swung, and I got a reaction out of the people that I'm with, and those are the things I want most in life. And Luffy plunges through the wood of this bridge. They lose the pack that had their meat in it, and they just managed to catch him before he falls. And I was like, what's going on here? And later on, I like the way that it felt to me was we're having a moment where they care so much about Luffy that they're risking themselves, and he can think back on it as a sort of warm and fuzzy moment when his brothers protected him and how they were all a team. But I have to admit, they really let go very easily, the fact that Luffy decided to just jump up and down on the bridge in a way that I don't know I could have done. I think I would have held a lot more of a grudge about that. I'm not proud of that. I'm not saying that's the right way to handle things. In fact, I think it's the exact wrong way to handle things. And I think I need to just let it go a lot more quickly whenever somebody just fucks up. But I have such a hard time with calling this a fuck up when it was so purposeful. They're warning him how dangerous it is, and he is literally laughing and ignoring them. And I rarely see Luffy like this. I see Luffy be thoughtless, but Luffy actively doing something because somebody finds it kind of upsetting is really, really rare. And as much as it felt correct to a child, I can overlook him being a total moron most of the time because I understand that he didn't give something much thought or didn't consider connecting these two dots. And here I was just like, I can't make excuses for you. You know exactly what you're doing, and maybe you just deserve to fall to your death, sir. I don't know. So yeah, eventually there's a moment where they're all laying together and Luffy is really thinking back on how cool it is to have brothers and that maybe they'll join his pirate crew someday. And he's sitting there kind of giggling to himself, and they are like, what is going on? And he says, I'm just happy, that's all. And we've got to make a deal that you guys are joining my crew. Do you promise? And both Sabo and Ace are like, the fuck do we do? No, I didn't say you could be Sabo's response, which I thought was really interesting, was, I'm not going to be somebody's lackey. He doesn't like the idea, after having been sort of forced into a role by his parents, of having to do that again for somebody else, which makes a lot of sense. But Ace's response is, it's sort of interesting. I don't feel like he just thinks that he's the best. Although, I that's in there, don't get me wrong. But I don't think that's the only motivating factor. I think that Ace sees himself as the most focused, which he definitely is. Sabo is pretty focused, but there is a single-minded goal to Ace that Sabo doesn't have the same drive for. Sabo wants freedom in general, but there's a lot of ways to live free. Ace wants to be the strongest, most badass fighter, which is very, very specific. And so I can understand how he sort of sees that his own laser focus is just better for a captain. I'm not sure that's even true, but I can understand how he thinks this way. And so what Luffy is saying is why don't we just work as a team to catch the tiger? And whoever deals the final killing blow will be the one who gets to be captain. We'll just see who lands the final hit. And they agree to this. So they go out into the woods again, and there's yet another bear, which they're like, okay, we'll use this bear as a warm-up. But the bear is about to just level the two of them. Or the three of them, I should say. He gets a big bump on his head and then begins chasing him. Chasing them. I'm sorry, I keep misspeaking. Eventually, though, they're running into this clearing and they come across this old man. And he gets between them and the bear. His name is Naguri. And all he has to do is hold up a hand, and this bear stops dead. Which is, I'm assuming, the use of haki. It's maybe not that simple. Because the way that he reacts when Luffy later says how you just stopped that bear, it does not feel like somebody for whom Luffy got the right answer and he's reacting to that. It sounds like somebody who's hearing Luffy's explanation and then is like, yeah, sure, that's it, and it's just a real, for me, it felt like that something else was going on. He doesn't have hockey, but he's going to let them think he does, which I don't have a problem with, like, really, but I can't help but feel as if these kids help him build this ship and, like, worship him in a way that he definitely does not necessarily deserve. It works out in the end, I think, for everybody, but it is, when I realized, like, that sounds like he's just lying to Luffy, and then Luffy wants to become his apprentice, all I could think was just like, you're really letting him operate under some assumptions here that aren't, I don't know if this is ethical, but what can you do? Because also I'm looking at this illustration here too, and just before the bear gets to him, he reaches into his robes, and when he's holding his hand up, it's possible that he's holding something and showing it to the bear, and that is somehow has gotten him to stop. I don't know though. I can't tell. Anyway, we find out that he is somebody who works around Great Terminal collecting stuff all the time, and that he gets, like, picked on a lot because people, like, see him creating this weird stuff. And I loved Luffy's reaction, because when I think Sabo's the one telling this part of the story, when Sabo describes how he'll get picked on and he'll just sit there and take it, Luffy's response, because of the way that he got taught by Shanks, is like, oh yeah, that's just how pirate captains are, which is so funny, because, like, that's literally the exact opposite of how pirate captains are. But it has only, like, one frame of reference, this guy that he really admires, and so he says it with total certainty. And understandably, Sabo is sort of sick of hearing about Shanks. I hadn't really thought of it until this scene, but if we're to, like, extrapolate what their conversations tend to be like, I would not be surprised if Luffy talks about Shanks, like, 20 times as often as he does on screen, because all they talk about is wanting to be pirate captains, and he's one of the only ones any of them knows. So yeah, he would be our main reference point, and I probably would get pretty sick of it as well. So we find out there's this whole thing where Ace wants to fight him, Naguri, and the vibe with him is so aggressive, and that comes up a little bit later, but it's in response to the fact that Naguri says he himself and his crew went up against Gold Roger and they lost. He's basically like, we got spanked and put in our place, but it sucked. And the suggestion is, like, they basically leveled my crew and now I'm here like a pauper, sucks to suck. And just the mention of Gold Roger is enough to get Ace to get up and walk away, which I just have to, like, I have to give Ace a little bit of grace here and say he's a child, because if you don't want people knowing somebody is related to you, I really recommend simply not getting up and walking away in the middle of a conversation with no explanation, because I feel like that reaction is a real dead giveaway, my guy, that something is up. Like, it just draws attention to the whole thing. And allegedly, that's exactly what you want to avoid. And I'm not sure whether I should believe that. But what happens, and I thought this was hilarious. Not really, like, but he walks away, and I think it's Naguri who's like, did he just leave? And Sabo just says, oh, yeah, well, his dad's Goldie Roger. So, but don't tell him, though. You can't tell him that I told you. Sabo, I am going to need you to not blame Luffy later when he blurts out this whole secret, because the fact that you ever thought somebody whose personality I thought we had gotten to know pretty well by now, if you ever thought somebody like Luffy was going to be able to keep that secret, you are brain dead. And that's setting aside entirely the real issue, which is the fact that they don't know Naguri at all. Like, they've seen him around. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever to think that this secret is safe with Naguri. None. Just because you like him because you hung out today, like, just because he gets picked on and so you think, oh, he's not friends with other pirates, like, no, this person has information to trade for resources now. That's a problem. You put him in this position, and it's just completely luck whether he decides he's going to cash in on that or not. And he doesn't. But it really was sort of like, to me, there were some moments where I was waiting for him to betray them. I thought that was where this like whole plot was going to turn, was going to be Naguri going into town and letting everybody know, oh, Gold Roger's son is hiding in the woods, and basically putting a target on Ace's back, because I didn't know him very well. Florian is in the chat saying, I love in One Piece, people just know big secrets and deliver them like, yeah, no big deal. Garp did it, and Luffy as well. Oh yeah, I guess Garp did too, huh? But yeah, the like fact that Sabo told is very quickly revealed to Ace later, because Luffy just like blurts it out. And Ace freaks and just beats the shit out of Luffy and Sabo. And it's sort of a weird thing because, like, they'd been getting along really well. And they all seemed to be, like, on the same page here. And this guy shows up, and I think Luffy just, like, barely mentions that he's, like, can you teach me some stuff? But the title of this episode is Luffy Becoming an Apprentice. And at no point does it feel like this dude is taking him under his wing. And I kept waiting for the moment where Luffy walks off with this old man into the sunset, and it doesn't happen. And the next episode just begins with Luffy having left. And I was so confused. And I don't know if I missed something or if there is a scene that is cut in like the dub version, but I actually went back to the end of the previous episode and rewatched it because I was certain that I had like pressed next episode too soon. I always wait for when it says to be continued or whatever it is. And I thought like, oh my God, is there sort of post-credits scene, for lack of a better word? But no, not that I saw. So if I missed something like really obvious and direct, I'm sorry. But I was totally at sea. So they get in this big fight, and it ends with Ace saying like, all of you guys are dead to me. And what, like, the appearance of this fight is sort of weird because it almost gave the suggestion that they had like torn down the whole tree house. There's all kinds of stuff all over them. And after they both respond to hit like, you bastards are dead to me, with took the words right out of my mouth, everything sort of shifts. And I thought it was all shifting because the place was like falling, and evidently not. So it was a weird beat, but I just wanted to mention that as well. And then right before we have our, the end of the episode, Blue Jam is talking to his pirates, and we find out that Sabo's father is coming to these pirates to find his son. And I'm just thinking, like, oh, okay, he's had enough of his son being missing, didn't know for sure what had happened to him, and now he's like initiating getting him back. But Sabo is very much more like, why does my dad want me to come back all of a sudden later on? Like, he feels like this is weird when he didn't really put much effort in before. And then we find out about the fire that's scheduled and that he clearly just wanted to get his son out of there before it went down, which makes sense. And Blue Jam is determined to like wring as much as he can out of Sabo's father and is like, all right, well, we're going to have a bit of a difficult time locating his son so that we can make him feel really, really grateful to us and perhaps get a favor out of him, which is a smart move. And then we have the one tiny little scene with Dadan where she is reading the newspaper and finding out that the celestial dragons are like coming to their island, which she didn't even know the name of their island. And I found that really funny. But it just immediately ties right in with the homeless and Joe Biden thing. Like that was just, it was so 1-to-1, that comparison. So the next episode, all of them are continuing to try and go after this tiger because they are going by the rules of figuring out who is going to be the captain. And I can't help but wonder, like, I have to think they probably would, but I wondered if they were to all like become pirates together, would they stick to this deal? And I feel like the deal is meant to be quite serious and for real in the moment while they're children. But I also can see how a promise made when you were children that's this like long-standing would almost start to take on a sort of sacredness. And so even when you were older and it really didn't make sense to continue going with this plan, that you would still follow it anyway, because it's just become that meaningful that the actual letter of it isn't what you like think about anymore. And so I kind of was interested to see who was going to take the tiger down, because I was like, I don't know, I could see that like being definitive actually. But yeah, so this episode, it's just Ace and Sabo figuring this out, and Luffy isn't with them. And Sabo's talking to Ace about how to catch this tiger, and Ace is just being fucking surly. This is like the most unexpected thing for me about Ace as a kid is how bad-tempered he was, because he's so likable as a grown-up. He has a temper for sure, but as a kid, he is sullen all the time. And there is just this constant feeling of like this chip on his shoulder that he doesn't have once he's gotten older. And it makes sense, especially if he finds a crew that feels like family and he can sort of get over the baggage with his dad. But it just really has come as a surprise to me. I thought that like the attitude that he has had about being too cool was only directed at Luffy from the beginning, just to establish an obstacle that Luffy has to overcome for them to be friends. And the longer that this whole arc has gone on and Ace has continued to have this shitty attitude, I've been surprised, because I thought it was just a temporary thing and that it was like directed at Luffy and not his actual personality. But no, it turns out it's just his personality at this point, which is very irritating. And I appreciated Sabo just kind of biting his head off here and being like, don't you give a shit about Luffy? Like, why are you trying to act like you don't care about this? And at one point he says, maybe we haven't heard from him because he's dead already. And Ace just turns around and is like, did you say something? Oh my God, he's so annoying. He's finally, well, you know, he's the one who left. So I don't really care what happens to him because he made that choice. And Sabo's response is, listen, I don't know who you're trying to impress with this, which was such a good line. It really was. Sabo's like, I know it's not me because I fucking know better. And you can't think that I believe this bullshit. And there's nobody else here. So what exactly is your fucking problem? And as they're discussing this, a tree falls and they just manage to get out of the way. And there is Luffy. And he's like, hey, sorry about that. And he winds up leading them back to the campsite with the old man at Great Terminal, who tells them basically, I haven't been training Luffy. Because they're like, what have you been teaching him? And he's like, all he's been doing is just cutting firewood. And I mean, it's probably made him like physically stronger, but it hasn't been combat stuff or anything like that. And this just made me so mad again that he like let Luffy think he had a magical ability that I am becoming more and more certain simply never had, because that feels like it's just taking advantage of a child for child labor. And I was like, sir, I get that you're an old man, but like, at least be fucking for real with this kid. And then we finally get the thing where he and Ace face off. And Ace is convinced that he's going to be able to take him down no problem. He really has a visualization in his head about how this is going to go. And this man is just... It's kind of funny, all things considered, because we see Ace beating the shit out of adults a fair amount. So the fact that this man is able to hold his own against Ace shows that he is actually above average in terms of fighting, even amongst younger men, which is pretty impressive. But it's just really something to see Ace walk into that so sure. And even when he gets beaten, he's like, I'll beat you next time. And is fully planning to like come and rematch this guy again. And that's part of what separates people like Ace from people like me. You know, that I'm thinking, well, you just got completely pwned in front of everybody. Maybe just like take your L and go sit in the corner and lick your wounds and just try and get better and see this as a humbling moment. But Ace sees things in so much more a competitive you versus me kind of way than I do. You know, I would be viewing this as like an indictment of my overall progress. But what Ace is seeing is like, that guy beat me. And that's all he cares about, is not winning in a way that's like extremely immature. Also, again, with very laser focused and oddly effective, it seems. Like, the fact that he is competitive and just determined to beat everybody around him no matter what does seem to improve his skill overall. So I can't fault him for it, actually. But yeah, he finally, like, hasn't said that he's Gold Roger's son, and I don't remember if Sabo even confesses that he said it in front of Naguri, or if it's just Luffy that he's like taking responsibility for. But he is talking to this guy, and it's a weird conversation, and I'm wondering if there's something about this that is sort of missing me as having to read the dubs, you know? But Ace is saying, because this guy is sort of talking up Gold Roger, and Ace is saying if he's so great, then why does everybody hate him? And it's just thinking back to the way that he was treated. But this dude makes a point of like, wait, did those people actually meet Gold Roger? Like, did the people who hate him actually fight him and see him face to face? In the world of pirates, if you lose a fight, you lose your life. And yet, Roger chose to spare mine. And if those pirates did face him, they should be grateful. Complaining like that is a luxury. One they only have because their lives were spared. And Ace doesn't really seem to know how to react to that. He replies with, if he had a son, do you think he should be grateful too? Which felt like a little bit of a non sequitur. I was like, that's not really relevant exactly to what's... I mean, like, everybody would say everybody should be grateful. But this dude just responds, knowing full well who he is. I'd feel sorry for him because I know that his father's name would just haunt him wherever he went with a legacy like that. I wouldn't blame him for resenting the man. And it's not like he could talk it out with him either. At any rate, if I were his son, I wouldn't want to be a pirate. His name could scarcely do me any favors, and more likely than not, it would put a target on my back. And Ace gets really mad about that, which I thought was funny because I fully expected that he had thought about this already. It feels like he's reacting as if he's just been told, don't become a pirate, you idiot, because of this. And I'm just like, you had to know that it was going to put a target on your back. That if you became a pirate as his son, you'd be compared to him even more. Like, it's weird that he's somebody that you hate so much, but you're actually following in his footsteps. It's never occurred to you before. I was just really surprised at his reaction because I thought it was going to be lead up to an explanation of why he's making this choice. And instead, it just seems like this caught him totally off guard. So anyway, this is the point where the, he gets got in the fight, and then they find out about the huge ship that this guy has been building with all of the stuff that they've been collecting, or that he's been collecting. But he wants their help, and I was cracking up so much because Ace says something about, like, why should we help you? And he says, because I spared your life, you ungrateful little snot. Which is then followed up with Sabo saying, that's fine for Ace, but how did I get looped into this mess? What is this, a child labor scheme? Which, considering the fact that he's just using Luffy to, like, cut firewood and isn't actually teaching him anything, isn't an unjust accusation, in my opinion. I feel like this has some basis. I feel like if you were going to make a case, you could probably do it in a court of law, and it would be compelling. But he tells them all, I can give you some tiger fighting tips if you stick around, too. But Ace says, I got one question. What are you going to do when the ship is done? And he says, I'm taking it on the sea, of course. Like, I'm going to find my crewmates after we got spanked and split up. And their response is basically, do you know that you are old? Are you aware that you have very little time left to live? Because it really feels like it's just ambitious. It's optimistic. I feel like you probably should give up on that. And he just basically says, once a pirate, always a pirate. And you're never too old to give up on your dreams. You kids have a problem with that. And Luffy is delighted. Sabo just says, well, I'm not going to stop you. But Ace walks away. And eventually, again, I guess I'll help you for now since you spared my life. But I'm beating you tomorrow. And I was just like, oh my God, Ace, I never thought you could be this boring, but you really are. I'm tired of you. So I really, really liked this because, like, especially as somebody who's entering what's probably going to be like the second half of my life, or at least the dead center of it, I feel sometimes like it is too late to pursue certain things. And it's always just inspiring to see somebody who's older just be like, yeah, I'm going to fucking do it. Because sometimes it's not just as simple as like, well, I know for sure I can't, but it's more of a sense of like, well, I can't, I have passed the point that people who I see as being successful achieve that. Like, there's no models out there for me to look at. And it can get very discouraging, feeling like you had to start your way towards success from when you were a teen, or else you're just never going to reach it. So, yeah, I just like this little moment here. And when Ace says, I'm going to beat you tomorrow, the old man just seems like pleased by that. He doesn't react badly. So then we have the training and the building of his ship, which is that's really what the training is. It's sparring matches as well, but for the most part, they're doing a lot of physical labor, and it's what turns out to be it's like weight training. We see them carrying huge bundles of logs and gears that are like the size of them, things like that. But eventually we have springtime coming up, and the time where we have to say goodbye to Naguri. It's really like, I just really liked the fact that I cared that he was leaving. You know, like, he isn't actually taking off on this day, but the ship is ready and he is going to go fairly soon. So all I could think by the end of this trio of episodes is that the people of this area, Great Terminal, may be able to like evacuate on his ship. But I don't know, you know. Eventually, when he's working on the ship in the middle of the night, like everybody's asleep, and Ace comes up to him and says, "What does it mean to be a captain?" Because he mentions like a strength beyond the physical. And when Luffy says, "Well, what is it?" he then laughs and just says, "Well, I've forgotten." And when Ace asks him, he says, "I'll be honest, even after all these years, I'm not sure. Frankly, I don't think I was a very good captain. But my crew, they still followed me. Right to the end, they called me captain without any doubt. And so, in a way, I'm still captain of the Naguri pirates. Not because of my strength, but because of the approval of my crew. That's the true test of a captain, or so I always say." So, essentially, what it's coming down to is like, did you earn your men's respect? Do they trust you? If they do, you've proven yourself to them, you know? Ace does not take this well, though, and I can understand that because I remember as a child being given like advice that felt as nebulous as this, when I just wanted to be given like a math problem to solve to tell me the answer. And you just want something a lot more concrete than this. So he's giving Ace a real, genuine answer that I think is more useful than Ace realizes at the time. But for the moment, Ace is dismissing it utterly. And it is kind of funny to see how, like, he just says a bunch of crap as he's walking away. But eventually, he begins to understand the reality of it. And it's part of what plays into all of them working together to catch this tiger. Which, it's really cute the way that they, the trust that is so implicit, and how quickly they fall into line when Ace has a plan. That is sort of what defines a leader. Like, if you put forth an idea and people are sort of like, I don't know, man, because they've seen you do some dumb shit in the past, because you have a tendency towards a certain type of behavior, and this is just like more of the same. But if you say something and people actually listen because they have grown to see that you have good judgment, that's leadership, you know? And I really like how it's not obvious in the moment to me that that's the sort of situation that he has set up with this fight with the tiger, but it works out that way. And even when he wins and they're all just like, God damn it, I can't believe he won, they can't be that mad about it because he earned it. What surprised me is that Ace turns it down and is just like, I'm not going to be captain. It just doesn't feel right. Really, really compelling. I have so much curiosity about what he means by that. And I don't know if it's tied into having daddy issues or exactly what the deal is there, but it was really surprising that he made this point the way that he did and then declined to be in charge. And yeah, I just kind of liked it. It was really surprising. So, okay, at the end of the episode is, I'm trying to see, to make sure that I haven't skipped over anything here. But we have the reveal of the sigil. It's the Jolly Roger. And Naguri finally, he takes off all by himself. And, guys, I forgot that he actually does leave because I was thinking that he might be an option, but I guess he's gone. He could come back. I don't see it, though. So, the third episode, which I've mostly talked about already, is the one where Sabo gets brought back to live at home. And he's basically brought under duress because he's told that his father is going to hurt his friends if he doesn't come along quietly. So he agrees to come along quietly, but it's not too long before he realizes that he's been had. I fully expected for his father to, fuck up his friends anyway. So when it turned out that there was this whole fire thing, it made more sense to me because it looked almost at first like his father was going to keep his word and be like, all right, well, since you came, I won't hurt your friends. But I was sort of like, that doesn't feel like a One Piece villain type. The whole thing with them is that they don't keep promises, right? They'll say one thing and then just do whatever. And finding out that it's just like a bigger picture breaking of the promise made a lot of sense. But Sabo is just so devastated to walk away from this. And Ace is piling it on in a way that I was like, dude, can you have a little tact here? Because he keeps being like, are you just going to give up on your dreams like this? And I'm like, Ace, bruh, that's not fair. He's saving you guys. You're surrounded. You guys could just be skewered right now. Give him a break. But eventually, he comes home and it's so weird, you guys, because it turns out that they have adopted this other kid while he was gone. And the way this kid is animated is weird. He looks like he is from a different cartoon, if that makes sense. The style, his name is Stelly, and the way his nose is drawn is that it comes down all the way from his brow, straight down. It's just a style of drawing that looks totally out of place. And even the look of his eyes is weird. It's kind of reminding me there are different eye styles that I remember specifically seeing on Killer Bark. But his eyes look much more doll-like. And they're extremely creepy. And the whole point with this kid is that he's going to poke and prod and be a real Helmeppo type. Spoiled and insidious and really not insidious, insinuating. That's the word I want. And trying to get under Sabo's skin right away because it clearly matters to him that he be the favored child. And he doesn't seem to understand how little Sabo cares about that. Because as much as it's annoying to hear, it would be better for me if you had never come back and your parents like me better than you. All that's doing is making Sabo realize why he didn't come home again. And I feel like what this kid had intended was to establish dominance and beat Sabo down and kind of bully him. So he doesn't get what he's after here. And yeah, this is when he says, to think if you had stayed in Great Terminal just one day longer, you'd be dead like the rest of them. And Sabo is like, wait, what are you talking about? And he explains the whole thing with the fires. And Sabo is like, they're going to just kill all the people? And he gets dressed and jumps right out the window. And we find out, even though he watches some folks and thinks, oh, they're too happy, they couldn't possibly know what's going on. when he walks away, we hear them say, oh yeah, and tomorrow is going to be even better because then we won't have that trash living so close by. So he is like certain, oh, they couldn't be acting this way if they knew about it. But then he overhears some soldiers talking about it. And it turns out that Blue Jam is in on this somehow. He asks himself, what could Blue Jam be getting out of it? Like, what's in it for him? I kind of wonder if he even knows what's going to happen, because I think he's being played and set up for his own destruction and doesn't know it. But that is the job that Blue Jam has paid Luffy and Ace to take on. He wants them to bring these boxes all over and place them in certain places, and he'll pay them for it. And I don't know if he's just giving them the same, like, message that he was given and hasn't checked the boxes, or if he knows what the plan is and he's just planning to save only himself and his crew, maybe not even his crew. But I was just sort of operating under the assumption that Blue Jam doesn't actually know what's happening here. And knowing that, like, Luffy and Ace have become unwilling participants in creating this, it's just so shitty. Like, it reminds me of, there was a point when I worked at Whole Foods. I left and I was like still very close with a lot of my friends who worked there. And so I heard the stories after I left, but there was a series of firings. And looking back now, I'm beginning to understand that it was right around the time that Whole Foods was transitioning from being like more of a cooperative company to much more capitalist. And there were clearly made up reasons for firing folks, because they were just trying to lower the labor budget by hiring new people at lower wages, because Whole Foods had been pretty great about steadily giving raises. And if you do that and people stay for a long time, your labor budget becomes pretty huge. So one of my friends had been told not that folks were getting fired. He was just asked to help them in the break room, or not a break. It was like a conference room. Will you go get so-and-so from the front and bring them here and just wait outside for a little bit, and we'll give you the next name of somebody to bring in. And after the first one, and they come out crying, he realized they're sending me to bring people to get fired. And he felt awful, but like he had to do what he was told. So he kept doing that, bringing people back. And then at the end of the day, they brought him in and they fired him too. And I still think about that all the time. Somebody who's like doing what he thinks he has to save himself, not realizing that he is just as disposable as everybody else, counting himself lucky that he still has a job, and all day watching other people be tormented and being just as much of a victim at the end of that day as the rest of them, and not seeing it coming at all. And that is kind of what I feel like this is comparable to, with them setting all of this up and having no idea what they're like really participating in. So when Sabo like runs into some people on the street and asks them if they know about it, and they blurt out like, of course we know. He is horrified. And as he's like running away, he's looking around the neighborhood at all of these people who are just smiling and having like a perfectly normal, lovely day. And it's just like, what the fuck is wrong with everybody? Which is a good question. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? You know, like, I just really felt this, it just brought up a lot of emotions for me, because this is essentially how it works. It's an extreme example nowadays, but very recently it wasn't that extreme. And it's only a little bit more sterilized now. So it's pretty upsetting. Like, when he runs into this guy on the street, and after the people that he like goes and talks to at the cafe, there's a kindly old man that he runs into, and he asks as well, like, have you heard about the fire? Are you not, and you're not worried at all? Nobody in this town cares what happens. Nobody in the town thinks to stop this thing. The old man says, that's admirable of you. You must have a very kind heart, but don't say a word. It's important we keep our mouths shut. Think what would happen if someone outside of Hightown found out about the plan. You and I are special. We come from great noble families. And it's just so funny because of the way he starts it off. Oh, that's really kind of you. You really think that, like, he's going to be one of the different ones. And instead, it's just like, oh, that's so sweet of you, but don't be too sweet. Like, don't really care. Like, you could say something that's placating, but, like, don't get invested in that and actually give a shit about other people. That's a real slippery slope, which isn't too far off from the way a lot of white liberals operate, actually. So, yeah, the episode just ends with him, like, saying to himself, there's something wrong with these people. They're going to die, and they're happy that they're all going to die. This place is sick. I have to get out of here. I have to tell them right now. And as he's running out, and there's the wind is picking up, which is not good for just causing a fire to get even worse. He gets spotted by some people, and they begin to chase him down because he's the runaway boy, and his father noticed a lot more quickly than he was hoping, I think, that he had gone missing. And that is the end of the episode. So, yeah, I really, really like this arc. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. All right, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. Thank you, Florian, for commissioning this one. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.